And that's where CNN's Bill Hemmer is standing by. Set the scene for us over there, Bill. What's going on?
Well, Wolf, at this time, the sun is starting to set somewhat to the west, and normally at this time of the night, we should start to see some of the rescuers who have been working inside come out and really trickle away at this point. We were here early this morning, just about 5:30 a.m. About that time and the hours after that, Wolf, we saw hundreds and hundreds of rescuers going in on flatbed trucks heading inside. What you're watching right now, though, is some new videotape. These are aerial shots of what is known now as the site, Ground Zero, Wolf, as you mentioned there, and you can see the utter devastation spread out over so many city blocks here in Lower Manhattan. The other thing that's quite obvious, on the outside of that site there, you can see a number of skyscrapers still standing at this time, and we're told that they still could be quite precarious. Structural engineers going inside at this time throughout the day, trying to determine if indeed those buildings are safe. In the meantime, Wolf, we've talked throughout the weekend here about donations, and we tried to get the word out yesterday that everybody was telling us, please, if you want to help, send money. No more food, no more water, no more clothing. They have plenty of that. And again this afternoon, the governor of New York, George Pataki, reiterated that message. He came out and talked just about 2 hours ago.
To people who want to help, don't come here. We don't need you here now, but you can help. You can join your fire company, join your ambulance corps at home, support the Salvation Army and the Red Cross, and of course you can donate funds, because there are not just thousands of victims, but thousands and thousands of their children and families who are going to need our help as we go through this.
Governor Pataki, a short time ago, also in that briefing, got very emotional, tears at one time, choking back tears as he tried to describe his feelings right now as the search and rescue operation, they're still calling it that, continues here in Manhattan. We did meet one very lucky person today. Dave Lim works for the Port Authority Police Department. He's along with the K-9 unit. He was in the North Tower inside trying to help and rescue people when the tower crashed to the ground. He says he's alive today only because people came to his rescue, and today he had a message as well.
I'm here today, and I'm here to tell everybody, especially the rescuers, that I know that they haven't found anybody in a while, and that you can survive something like this, and I'm living proof of that. If that helps you to keep going, then I've done my job today.
Dave Lim, very courageous man, came out and talked with us earlier today. He says his partner, a yellow lab, has not been heard from since, and clearly he is quite disappointed at this time, and he had some tears as well. There's been a lot of tears this week in New York City. Wolf, the search and rescue operation continues. The mayor today saying 5,097 still missing at this point. Back to you now in Washington.
And as you know, Bill, there have been a lot of tears, not only in New York City, but around the country, indeed, around the world. Thank you very much. This footnote, we've heard countless stories about Americans coming together to help in any way they can in the aftermath of the attacks. And that effort extends to the rescue dogs in New York, who will now get canvas and leather shoes to wear while working in the rubble, thanks to a Wisconsin pet supply company. Spokesman says the special shoes strap onto the dog's paws and help protect them from glass and other debris.
Begin this half hour with an update on today's developments. The FBI has conducted a raid on an apartment in Delray Beach, Florida, the home of at least one of the suspected hijackers aboard the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. Agents have been seen leaving with bags presumably containing evidence. On another front in the investigation, a second man has been arrested as a material witness in the attacks. President Bush says Osama bin Laden remains the prime suspect in the terrorist attacks, despite a statement today in which bin Laden denied any involvement. The president is back at the White House after intensive meetings this weekend at Camp David with his national security team. Pakistani senior officials will travel to Afghanistan on Monday to warn the Taliban they face a massive assault unless they hand bin Laden over to the United States. And President Bush acknowledges that he gave the go-ahead for the U.S. military to shoot down any authorized, unauthorized aircraft headed toward the White House or the Capitol as the terror attacks unfolded. The 4 hijacked jets, though, all crashed before the military could intercept them.
Joey, as we reported, the administration and Congress are examining ways to boost the nation's intelligence gathering capacity. They say intelligence will be a prominent pillar in the war against terrorism. Vice President Cheney addressed the matter in an interview today, and he also defended the intelligence community from charges that someone must have dropped the ball in not averting the attacks last Tuesday.
With respect to the intelligence area, there'll be, I'm sure, a lot of sort of Monday morning quarterbacking, second guessing, if you will, about whether or not there was an intelligence failure. Clearly, we did not learn of this operation, or we would have stopped it if we had. But I think it's important to remember that our men and women in the intelligence business out there all over the world, 365 days a year defending and protecting us, oftentimes very successful, oftentimes in ways we can never talk about. But we clearly need to do everything we can to forestall those kinds of activities by improving our intelligence capabilities, and this offers a lot of lessons learned. But we have to recognize, no matter how good we are, no matter how aggressively we pursue this, we're likely to be subject to that, partly by the very nature of our society. We're an open society. We love it that way. That's very important to preserve that and not to let the terrorists win by turning ourselves into some kind of police state. We also have to work, though, sort of the dark side, if you will. We've got to spend time in the shadows and in the intelligence world. A lot of what needs to be done here will have to be done quietly, without any discussion, using sources and methods that are available to our intelligence agencies if we're going to be successful. That's the world these folks operate in. And so it's going to be vital for us to use any means at our disposal, basically, to achieve our objective.
Vice President Cheney speaking today on NBC's Meet the Press. And in that interview, the Vice President also expressed support for CIA Director George Tenet, who's been the target of some criticism since Tuesday. Cheney said Tenet is doing a superb job. Another prominent official is speaking out today as well, Secretary of State Colin Powell. Powell spoke at length with me on the nature of the conflict ahead and what the United States now expects of countries who may harbor terrorists. Here's Secretary Powell.
And we're going to make it clear to them that they must comply with previous directions they have received from the United Nations and other organizations to stop this, to expel this organization, to destroy this organization, or to help us to destroy this organization. And they will be held accountable for the support they have given to this organization if that's who we finally determined is responsible and we're going after them. They will have to make their choice, whether they want to be in the receiving end of the full wrath of the United States and others, or whether they want to get rid of this curse that they have within their country. I'm not carrying expectation. The only thing I'm looking for is results. They either do or they don't. It's binary, yes or no. You either respond to this crisis, this tragedy, this horrible thing that was perpetrated by perhaps al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, and all the indications point in that direction. You either respond and rip them up, help us rip them up, get rid of them, or you will suffer consequences. We're probably going to be in the counterterrorism business at a very high level of intensity for as long as anyone can imagine, as long as there are people out there who are willing to do the kinds of things those terrorists did this week. Then we're going to have to be on guard and constantly looking for them, trying to penetrate them and trying to stop them, and not just respond to them, but to stop them, get ahead of them. This is going to change the way we do business. It's going to change the way we go about our daily life here in the United States. It's going to require a greater emphasis on homeland defense so we can defend ourselves against those who, notwithstanding our best efforts overseas, are still trying to get in to the country to hurt us. And so we should see this as a long-term campaign and do apply decisive force to it. And that force isn't just military force. It's all the elements of national power that are at our disposal.
Again, that was Secretary of State Colin Powell speaking with me earlier today. In that interview, Powell also echoed President Bush in saying Osama bin Laden remains the prime suspect for what occurred last Tuesday. As we told you, bin Laden today again denied any connection to the attacks. CNN's David Ensor listened to the remarks today by General Powell and Vice President Cheney. He joins us now with more on what the nation's leaders are preparing the American people for. David?
Well, they're preparing the American people, Wolf, for a very long war, as they have both said. And Secretary Powell, you heard, calling it, for the moment at least, very much an intelligence war and a law enforcement war more than a military one. The administration promising a thoroughgoing reassessment of the nation's intelligence capabilities, with talk on Capitol Hill by some of a major intelligence failure here, and obviously CIA is not happy they weren't able to warn about what happened in New York and Washington. The administration looking at some of the policies that are in place. For example, currently there are rules at the CIA that if anyone wants to hire an informant in, for example, a terrorist organization who has blood on his hands, that has to be checked out. Informants have to be checked out for their human rights record and for their criminal record before they can be put on. As Vice President Cheney made clear earlier today, that's going to change.
You need to have on the payroll some very unsavory characters if, in fact, you're going to be able to learn all that needs to be learned in order to forestall these kinds of activities. It is a mean, nasty, dangerous, dirty business out there, and we have to operate in that arena.
Going even further than that, Secretary of State Powell said that the policy since 1976 that the United States has had it was put in place by President Ford, banning any kind of political assassinations, even that policy is being looked at.
It's still on the books, and as part of our campaign plan, we're examining everything. How the CIA does its work, how the FBI and Justice Department does its work. Are there laws that need to be changed or new laws brought into effect to give us more ability to deal with this kind of threat? So everything is under review.
That's all well and good, say people over at the U.S. intelligence agencies, but it's still the hardest job there is to penetrate a terrorist cell. And that is what they now have to do, Wolf.
They have their mission out ahead of them. Thank you very much, David Ensor, our national security correspondent. On Capitol Hill, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee plans to introduce a bill this week creating an Office of Counterterrorism at the White House. For more on what's ahead on the Hill, here's CNN congressional correspondent Jonathan Karl. Tell us what's going on, John.
Well, Wolf, Congress is on what one top aide to the Speaker of the House called a war footing, working together, the congressional leadership, House and Senate, Democrat and Republican, on an absolute fast track, several separate tracks, working all efforts to aid what is being called the war effort here. First and foremost, I'll get to the point you just mentioned, but first and foremost is the question of aiding law enforcement by easing restrictions on law enforcement as they try to track down whoever was involved in these attacks. The Attorney General, John Ashcroft, spoke earlier today about this. This is what he had to say.
There are areas of our laws and procedures which give us better tools against organized crime, against illegal gambling, for example, than we have against terrorists. We need to make sure that we provide the maximum capacity against terrorists in the United States.
Now, the Attorney General is talking to congressional leaders today. In fact, right now, one of the things we're being told he is saying is that some of those who were involved in this attack may still be in the country and may still pose a terrorist threat. Therefore, he's asking for broad new powers for law enforcement, such as broadened powers to tap phone lines, and as what the Democratic leader in the House, Dick Gephardt, is calling a rebalancing of freedom and also of the right of law enforcement to go out and track these people down. Now, also you have what you mentioned, this notion of establishing a White House Office of Counterterrorism that's being compared to the Office of the Drug Czar, which was under President Clinton a cabinet-level position. It would be a person who would be in charge of all the counterterrorism efforts being done by other agencies like the FBI, like the CIA. Also, finally, they are calling the economy part of the national security equation up here, and Democratic and Republican lawmakers have been meeting and talking today about efforts to stimulate the economy, including that bailout of the airlines we've been talking about, including actually both Democrats and Republicans talking about a new round of tax cuts designed to stimulate the economy. Wolf, all this going on at a pace you've just never seen up here on Capitol Hill before, where the House and the Senate working together so they can pass these things and get them right to the President to sign. Back to you.
And with virtually no opposition, Jonathan Karl, thank you so much for joining us. Back to you, Joey.
Wolf, one of the big questions, of course, after the attacks on America, how do we prevent the kind of suicide hijackings that made Tuesday's devastation even possible? The Transportation Secretary, Norm Mineta, said today that he has appointed 2 new task forces.